This is part one of the Cedar Falls case. A story so haunting and complex it can only be told in two parts. Tonight, we begin at the very start, where the Mitchell family's perfect life began to unravel. In the sleepy borough of Cedar Falls, Pennsylvania, nestled between rolling hills and farmland just 40 miles southeast of Harrisburg, the Mitchell family represented everything good about small-town America. David Mitchell, a respected insurance agent with Keystone Insurance, and his wife Jennifer, a dedicated pediatric nurse at Cedar Falls General Hospital, had built what seemed like the perfect life together with their three children: 16-year-old Ashley, 12-year-old Tyler, and 8-year-old Madison. Their colonial-style home at 247 Elm Avenue, with its white picket fence and carefully manicured garden, was the kind of place where neighbors waved from their porches and children rode bicycles until streetlights came on. The house itself told the story of American suburban success. A two-story, four-bedroom colonial built in 1987, complete with a two-car garage, finished basement, and a backyard large enough for Tyler's baseball practice and Madison's swing set. David, 42, had lived in Cedar Falls his entire life, except for his college years at Penn State University, where he earned a degree in business administration. After graduation, he returned home to join his father's insurance agency, eventually taking over the business when the elder Mitchell retired in 2008. To his neighbors, David embodied small-town reliability. He coached Little League Baseball, served on the Cedar Falls Borough Council, and was a regular attendee at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. Jennifer, 38, had moved to Cedar Falls from Philadelphia after nursing school, drawn by the promise of a slower pace and the opportunity to work in pediatric care at the local hospital. She had met David at a community fundraiser in 2001, and their courtship was the stuff of small-town legend: dinner dates at Giuseppe's Italian restaurant on Main Street, long walks through Heritage Park, and a proposal at the annual Cedar Falls Harvest Festival that had the entire town talking. Their marriage in June 2002 was celebrated as a union of two of Cedar Falls' most respected young residents. Ashley arrived in 1996, followed by Tyler in 2000, and Madison in 2004. To everyone who knew them, the Mitchells represented the American dream fulfilled: successful careers, beautiful children, community involvement, and a love story that had unfolded in full view of an approving community. But on the morning of October 15, 2012, this picture-perfect facade would shatter forever when Jennifer Mitchell and her three children vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions, suspicion, and a community forever changed by unthinkable horror. Monday, October 15, 2012, began like any other autumn morning in Cedar Falls. The temperature was a crisp 52 degrees, and the maple trees lining Elm Avenue were painted in brilliant shades of orange and red. A gentle breeze carried the scent of burning leaves through the quiet suburban neighborhood, where residents were beginning their Monday morning routines. Jennifer Mitchell, 38, was scheduled to work the day shift at Cedar Falls General Hospital, where she had been a trusted member of the pediatric nursing staff for 12 years. Her reputation at the hospital was impeccable. Colleagues knew her as the nurse who would stay late to comfort a frightened child, who remembered every patient's name, and who brought homemade cookies for the night shift nurses on holidays. Her Monday routine was clockwork precision, refined over years of managing three children's schedules alongside her demanding career. The alarm would sound at 6:15 a.m., followed by a quick shower while David got dressed for work. By 6:45 she would have breakfast ready, usually oatmeal for the kids and coffee for the adults. Madison, their 8-year-old, required the most attention in the mornings, often needing help choosing clothes and remembering her homework folder. Ashley at 16 was largely self-sufficient but tended to run late, a trait that often caused tension between mother and daughter. Tyler, 12, was somewhere in the middle, responsible enough to get himself ready, but young enough to still need reminders about brushing his teeth and packing his baseball glove on practice days. The morning schedule was tight but manageable. Drop Madison off at Cedar Falls Elementary at 7:45 a.m., drive Ashley and Tyler to Cedar Falls High School by 8:15, then arrive at the hospital by 8:45 for the morning briefing with Dr. Patricia Reynolds, the head of pediatrics. But when Jennifer failed to show up for her shift that Monday morning, her supervisor, Nancy Williams, immediately sensed something was wrong. Nancy, a 15-year veteran of hospital nursing management, had worked closely with Jennifer since she'd started at Cedar Falls General. In all that time, she had never known Jennifer to be irresponsible or unreliable. Jennifer never missed work without calling, Nancy would later tell investigators, her voice still carrying the worry she'd felt that morning. In 12 years, I could count on one hand the number of times she'd been late, let alone absent without notice. She was the most reliable person I knew. Even when Madison had pneumonia last winter, Jennifer called 3 hours before her shift to arrange coverage. Nancy's first call to Jennifer's cell phone at 8:52 a.m. went straight to voicemail. The generic automated message, "You have reached Jennifer Mitchell. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible," would haunt Nancy for years afterward. She left a message asking Jennifer to call immediately, then tried again at 9:15 and 9:30. Both calls went directly to voicemail. Growing increasingly concerned, Nancy contacted Dr. Reynolds, who authorized her to call Jennifer's emergency contacts. The hospital employee database listed David Mitchell as the primary emergency contact, but Nancy decided to check on the children first, thinking perhaps there had been a family emergency that prevented Jennifer from calling. At 10 a.m., Nancy called Cedar Falls Elementary School. The school secretary, Mrs. Dorothy Hanson, checked the attendance records and confirmed that Madison Mitchell had not arrived that morning. There was no note from parents explaining the absence, no phone call requesting excused absence, nothing. "That's very unusual for the Mitchells," Mrs. Hanson told Nancy. "Jennifer always calls if Madison is going to be out sick. She's very conscientious about following school policy." Nancy's next call was to Cedar Falls High School, where the news was equally troubling. Both Ashley and Tyler Mitchell were marked absent from their first period classes with no explanation provided. The high school secretary noted that Ashley had perfect attendance for the first 6 weeks of school and had never been absent without prior notification. By 10:30 a.m., Nancy's concern had escalated to genuine alarm. She tried calling the Mitchell home phone, listed in the hospital directory as 717-5555-7823. The phone rang 6 times before going to the answering machine. "Hi, you've reached the Mitchell family. We can't come to the phone right now, but please leave a message and we'll get back to you. Have a blessed day." The cheerful family message, recorded sometime in the previous year with all 5 voices chiming in, would be played dozens of times over the coming weeks as friends, family, and investigators tried desperately to reach the missing family. At 11:30 a.m., Nancy made a decision that would prove crucial to the investigation. Rather than waiting any longer, she drove to the Mitchell home on Elm Avenue. The drive from Cedar Falls General Hospital took exactly 12 minutes, a route Nancy had traveled before when dropping off get-well cards for Jennifer during her brief bout with the flu 2 years earlier. The Mitchell house at 247 Elm Avenue appeared completely normal from the outside. Jennifer's silver 2010 Toyota Highlander sat in the driveway, positioned exactly as it usually was, close to the garage door but not blocking access to David's black 2011 BMW sedan, which was notably absent. The house itself looked pristine. The front lawn had been recently mowed, autumn mums decorated the front steps in decorative pots, and the morning newspaper sat neatly on the front porch, apparently retrieved and read. The windows were closed and curtains drawn, but that wasn't unusual for a family that had left for work and school. What was unusual was the complete silence. Even when the family was away, there were typically signs of life. The family's golden retriever, Buddy, would usually be visible in the backyard or would bark at visitors. But Nancy heard nothing. She knocked on the front door, waited, then knocked again more loudly. She called out, "Jennifer, it's Nancy from the hospital. Are you okay?" The silence that greeted her was absolute and unsettling. Nancy walked around to the back of the house, where she could see into the kitchen through a gap in the curtains. The room appeared spotlessly clean, but she couldn't see any signs of recent activity. Returning to the front porch, Nancy noticed that the mailbox was full, unusual for a family that typically retrieved mail as soon as they returned from work. She also observed that the automatic sprinkler system had run recently. leaving the characteristic pattern of water droplets on the driveway and walkway. At 12:15 p.m., Nancy made the call that would officially begin one of Pennsylvania's most perplexing missing persons cases. She contacted David Mitchell at his office at Keystone Insurance on Main Street. David Mitchell's office was located in a renovated Victorian house that had been converted to commercial use in the 1990s. The insurance agency occupied the entire first floor, with David's personal office in what had once been the front parlor. His secretary, Mrs. Grace Morrison, answered the phone on the second ring. Keystone Insurance, David Mitchell's office. This is Grace. How may I help you? This is Nancy Williams from Cedar Falls General Hospital. I need to speak with David Mitchell immediately. It's about his wife. Grace, who had worked for the agency for 8 years, later recalled that Nancy's tone immediately conveyed urgency. She transferred the call to David's office without the usual pleasantries. David's response to Nancy's call would be analyzed and reanalyzed countless times in the years that followed. According to Nancy's detailed statement to police, David seemed surprised but not panicked when she explained that Jennifer hadn't shown up for work and that all 3 children were absent from school. That's strange, David reportedly said. Jennifer left this morning same as always. I was already gone by the time she would have taken the kids to school, but everything seemed normal when I left for my 7:30 meeting. When Nancy explained that she had driven to the house and found no one home, David's concern seemed to escalate. I'll be right there, he told her. Meet me at the house. David arrived at 247 Elm Avenue at 12:35 p.m., driving his black BMW sedan and appearing, according to Nancy's later testimony, worried but composed. He was dressed in his typical work attire, khaki slacks, blue dress shirt, and a navy blazer. His appearance was neat and professional, showing no signs of distress or unusual activity. David's first action was to check the garage, using a remote control to raise the automatic door. Jennifer's Toyota was there, as Nancy had observed, but David immediately noticed something that hadn't been visible from outside. Her keys aren't on the hook, David told Nancy, pointing to a small key rack mounted on the garage wall. She always hangs her keys there when she comes home. Using his house key, David unlocked the front door and together he and Nancy entered the Mitchell home. What they found would puzzle investigators for the next 11 years. The house was immaculate, not just clean but pristinely organized in a way that seemed almost unnatural. Every surface was dust-free, every pillow was perfectly positioned, and there wasn't so much as a crumb on any counter or table. The living room looked as if it had been prepared for a magazine photo shoot, with decorative pillows arranged just so, and not a single item out of place. In the kitchen, the breakfast dishes had been washed, dried, and put away. The dishwasher was empty and clean. The counters had been wiped down with what appeared to be a bleach-based cleaner. Nancy noticed the faint chemical smell that lingered in the air. The breakfast table was cleared completely, with no indication that a family of 5 had eaten there just hours earlier. This is too clean, Nancy observed, though she couldn't articulate exactly why the pristine condition of the house seemed wrong. Jennifer's a neat person, but with 3 kids getting ready for school, there's usually some evidence of the morning routine. David nodded, seeming to agree. The kids are usually in a hurry. Madison especially. She's always leaving her homework folder on the counter or forgetting her lunch money. They moved upstairs to check the bedrooms. Jennifer and David's master bedroom was equally immaculate. The bed was made with military precision, the comforter pulled tight, and pillows arranged perfectly. Jennifer's nursing uniform for Monday, clean scrubs in her preferred navy blue, hung in the closet, still in its dry cleaning bag. Ashley's room told a more puzzling story. Her bed was made, but her school clothes, an outfit she had selected and laid out the night before, according to David, were still arranged on her dresser chair. Her backpack was missing from its usual spot by her bedroom door, but her cell phone charger was still plugged into the wall outlet by her bed. Tyler's room presented similar mysteries. His bed was made, his school clothes were laid out but not worn, and his baseball glove, which he took to school every Monday for after-school practice, was missing from his desk. Madison's room was perhaps the most unsettling. Her tiny bed was made perfectly, with her stuffed animals arranged in a precise line across the pillow. Her school clothes were laid out, but like her siblings, she appeared to have taken different clothes. Her small pink backpack was gone, but several school notebooks were scattered across her desk, suggesting she had been doing homework the previous evening. "This doesn't make sense," David said, standing in Madison's doorway. "If they left for school, why didn't they take the clothes they had picked out? And where's Jennifer's purse? She never goes anywhere without her purse." A systematic search of the house revealed more puzzling absences. Jennifer's purse was indeed missing, along with her car keys and cell phone. All 3 children's backpacks were gone, as were their lunchboxes and water bottles. But many items that would typically be taken to school or work remained behind. Ashley's favorite jacket, Tyler's calculator, and Madison's reading folder. Perhaps most mysteriously, Buddy, the family's 4-year-old golden retriever, was nowhere to be found. David checked the backyard, called the dog's name, and searched the basement, but there was no sign of the pet that Jennifer treated like a 4th child. "Buddy never leaves the yard without one of us," David told Nancy. "He's too well trained." Jennifer spent months working with a trainer to teach him boundaries. By 2 p.m., David's concern had escalated to genuine panic. He called several of Jennifer's friends, asking if they had seen or heard from her. He contacted Jennifer's sister Patricia in Ohio and her parents in Florida. None of them had any information about Jennifer's whereabouts or any indication that she had planned to leave Cedar Falls. At 2:15 p.m., David made the call that would officially launch the investigation. "Cedar Falls Police Department, this is Officer Thompson. This is David Mitchell at 247 Elm Avenue. Need to report my wife and 3 children missing." Officer Michael Thompson arrived at the Mitchell residence at 2:28 p.m., followed closely by Detective Robert Hayes, a 25-year veteran of the Cedar Falls Police Department who specialized in missing persons cases. Detective Hayes, at 52, had seen his share of family disappearances, and he approached the Mitchell case with the methodical professionalism that had solved dozens of cases over his career. Cedar Falls, with a population of just 8,200, typically saw fewer than 5 missing persons reports per year, and most involved teenage runaways who returned home within 24 hours. A case involving an entire family vanishing without trace was unprecedented in the borough's history. Detective Hayes began with a systematic interview of David Mitchell, conducted in the family's living room while Officer Thompson documented the scene with photographs. The interview, later transcribed and entered into evidence, would be scrutinized word by word in the years that followed. "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to walk me through this morning in as much detail as possible," Detective Hayes began. "Start from when you woke up and tell me everything you remember, no matter how insignificant it might seem." David's account of the morning would remain largely consistent in subsequent interviews, though small details would change in ways that would later raise red flags for investigators. "We woke up at 6:15 when the alarm went off," David began. "That's our normal time on weekdays. Jennifer got up first, she always does, and went to take her shower. I got dressed for work while she was in the bathroom." "What did you wear to work today?" Detective Hayes asked. "Same thing I'm wearing now. Khaki pants, this blue shirt, my navy blazer. I have a client meeting first thing Monday morning, so I always dress professionally." "Tell me about breakfast." "Jennifer had breakfast ready when I came downstairs around 6:50. She's very organized about the morning routine. The kids were already at the table. Madison was eating oatmeal. Tyler had cereal. I think Ashley just had toast. Jennifer had coffee and maybe a piece of toast." "Did anyone seem upset or unusual this morning?" David paused, a hesitation that Detective Hayes noted in his report. "Ashley was being typical teenage Ashley, kind of grumpy about having to get up early. Madison was chattering about some school project. Tyler was quiet, but that's normal for him in the mornings. Jennifer seemed fine, maybe a little tired, but nothing unusual." "What time did you leave for work?" "Around 7:30. I kissed Jennifer goodbye, told the kids to have a good day at school, and left through the garage." "Did you see Jennifer's plans for after dropping the kids off?" "She was scheduled to work at the hospital. Her shift starts at 9 on Mondays, so she usually arrives around 8:45 for the briefing." Detective Hayes made detailed notes about the timing, already calculating the gaps in David's account. If David left at 7:30 and Jennifer needed to drop Madison at school by 7:45, that gave her only 15 minutes to get 3 children ready and out the door. A tight timeline for any parent. Where did you go after leaving home? Directly to my office. I had an 8:00 meeting with a new client, Bob Patterson. He's looking for commercial insurance for his construction business. Detective Hayes noted the specific details David provided. How long did that meeting last? About an hour, maybe a little longer. Bob's the thorough type. He wanted to understand every aspect of the coverage. After that, I had paperwork to catch up on, some claims to process. When did you first learn that Jennifer hadn't shown up for work? The interview continued for 2 hours, with Detective Hayes asking increasingly detailed questions about the family's routines, relationships, and any recent changes in behavior. David's answers were consistent and detailed, but Hayes noticed something that would later prove significant. David seemed more focused on providing a logical explanation than expressing emotional distress about his missing family. While Detective Hayes interviewed David, Officer Thompson conducted a preliminary search of the house, looking for signs of struggle, forced entry, or unusual activity. His initial report filed that evening noted several observations that would become crucial to the investigation. No signs of forced entry. All windows secure, all doors locked normally. House appears extremely clean, almost sterile. No evidence of struggle or violence in any room. Missing items include victim Jennifer's purse, car keys, cell phone, all 3 children's school backpacks, lunch containers, water bottles. Also missing, family dog, golden retriever named Buddy. Victim's car present in garage. No apparent disturbance to victim's bedroom or personal items. Officer Thompson also noted something that wouldn't be fully understood until much later. Strong chemical smell throughout house, consistent with bleach-based cleaning products. Smell most noticeable in master bedroom and kitchen areas. By evening, the Cedar Falls Police Department had launched a full missing persons investigation. Chief Thomas Brady, recognizing the unusual nature of the case, requested assistance from the Pennsylvania State Police and authorized overtime for additional officers to join the search. The initial search focused on the immediate area around Cedar Falls. Officers checked local businesses, hospitals, and airports within a 50-mile radius. They contacted Jennifer's colleagues at the hospital, the children's teachers and friends, and extended family members across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida. Jennifer's cell phone records were subpoenaed immediately, though the phone appeared to have been turned off or destroyed sometime after 11 p.m. on October 14th. The last ping from her phone was recorded at 11:23 p.m., connecting to a cell tower that served the Cedar Falls area. David Mitchell was asked to provide a list of Jennifer's friends, co-workers, and regular contacts. The list, handwritten on legal pad paper in David's careful script, included 23 names with phone numbers and addresses. Police would eventually contact every person on the list, finding no one who had seen or heard from Jennifer after Sunday evening. The children's friends and classmates were interviewed at school, supervised by guidance counselors and with parental permission. The interviews revealed that all 3 Mitchell children had seemed normal on Friday, October 12th, the last day they were seen at school. Ashley had talked about plans to attend a football game that weekend, Tyler had mentioned an upcoming baseball tournament, and Madison had been excited about a class field trip planned for the following week. On Tuesday, October 16th, the investigation expanded significantly. Detective Hayes, now convinced that the disappearance was suspicious, requested permission to treat the Mitchell home as a potential crime scene. Chief Brady approved the request, and by noon, forensic specialists from the Pennsylvania State Police were processing the house room by room. The forensic examination would take 3 days and reveal evidence that fundamentally changed the nature of the investigation. But even before the full forensic results were available, Detective Hayes had begun to focus his attention on inconsistencies in David Mitchell's story. The first major discrepancy involved David's claimed timeline for Monday morning. While David insisted he had arrived at his office by 8:01 a.m. for a client meeting, security footage from the Keystone Insurance Building told a different story. The building's keycard system recorded David's entry at 9:42 a.m., nearly 2 hours later than he claimed. When confronted with this evidence on Wednesday, October 17th, David quickly amended his story. "I'm sorry, Detective. I forgot about stopping at the Wawa. After I left home, I needed to get gas and coffee. The place was busy, and I ran into Tom Peterson, guy I went to high school with. We hadn't seen each other in months, so we talked in the parking lot for a while. You know how it is when you bump into an old friend? Time just got away from me." Detective Hayes immediately contacted the Wawa convenience store on Route 2A3, the location David claimed to have visited. The store manager provided security footage from Monday morning, which showed dozens of customers coming and going between 7:30 and 9:30 a.m. David's distinctive black BMW sedan was nowhere to be seen in the parking lot during that time period. More importantly, Tom Peterson, when contacted by police, had no recollection of seeing David Mitchell on Monday morning or any recent morning. In fact, Peterson told investigators he rarely shopped at that particular Wawa and hadn't seen David Mitchell in over a year. "I think Dave's confused about when we talked," Peterson said. "The last time I saw him was at the hardware store sometime last spring. We chatted for a few minutes about baseball, but that was months ago." The discrepancies in David's story, combined with the unusual circumstances of the disappearance, led Detective Hayes to request a formal interview with David at the police station on Thursday, October 18th. This interview, conducted with David's attorney present, would mark the beginning of his transformation from concerned husband to primary suspect. On Thursday, October 18th, 3 days after his family's disappearance, David Mitchell stood before a bank of news cameras outside the Cedar Falls police station. The press conference, organized by Chief Brady in consultation with the Pennsylvania State Police, was intended to generate public interest and potential leads in the case. The small parking lot outside the single-story brick building that housed the Cedar Falls Police Department had been transformed into a media circus. News vans from WGAL TV, WHP TV, and WPMT TV filled the lot, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like technological flowers following the sun. Print reporters from the Harrisburg Patriot News, Lancaster New Era, and York Daily Record mingled with television journalists, all competing for the best angle on a story that was beginning to capture regional attention. David appeared flanked by Detective Hayes and Chief Brady, his appearance carefully managed by his newly retained attorney, Michael Brennan from the prestigious Harrisburg firm of Brennan Associates. David wore a conservative dark blue suit with a white shirt and red tie, an outfit chosen to convey both respectability and patriotic values. His hair was freshly cut, his shoes polished, and his appearance was that of a grieving but composed family man. The prepared statement, written with his attorney's guidance, would be replayed thousands of times over the subsequent decade. "Jennifer, if you can hear this, please come home," David said, his voice controlled but with a slight tremor that suggested deep emotion. "We love you. We miss you. Whatever's wrong, we can work it out together." He paused, appearing to gather himself before continuing. "Ashley, Tyler, Madison, Daddy loves you so much. We just want you safe. You're not in trouble. Just please, please come home to me." David's eyes appeared to fill with tears as he addressed potential abductors. "If someone has taken my family, please, I'm begging you. They're innocent. Jennifer is a nurse who's dedicated her life to helping children. She's never hurt anyone. My kids are just babies. Ashley's only 16, Tyler's 12, Madison's just 8 years old. Please, please let them come home." The emotional appeal concluded with a plea for public assistance. "If anyone has seen Jennifer, Ashley, Tyler, or Madison, please call the Cedar Falls Police Department immediately. Any information, no matter how small, might help bring my family home." The press conference was broadcast live on all 3 major television stations in the Harrisburg market and picked up by CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC for national distribution. The sight of a desperate father pleading for his family's return resonated with viewers across the country, generating thousands of calls to the tip line and extensive social media engagement. The Mitchell family Facebook page, normally used for sharing photos of school events and family vacations, became a hub for community support and search efforts. Within 24 hours of the press conference, the page had gained over 15,000 followers, with hundreds of comments offering prayers, search volunteers, and theories about what might have happened. Local businesses rallied to support the search efforts. Giuseppe's Italian restaurant, where David and Jennifer had their first date, provided free meals for search volunteers. The Cedar Falls hardware store donated flashlights, batteries, and other supplies. First National Bank of Cedar Falls established a reward fund that quickly grew to $25,000 for information leading to the family's safe return. But behind the public outpouring of support, law enforcement was developing a very different picture of David Mitchell and the circumstances surrounding his family's disappearance. The forensic examination of the Mitchell home, completed on Friday, October 19th, revealed evidence that transformed the case from a missing persons investigation to a suspected homicide. The most significant discovery came from luminol testing in the master bedroom, which revealed extensive blood spatter patterns that had been recently cleaned with bleach-based products. Dr. Patricia Wong, the forensic specialist who conducted the examination, later testified that the blood evidence covered approximately 60 square feet of the master bedroom, concentrated around the bed and extending onto the walls and ceiling. The pattern suggested a violent struggle involving significant blood loss. The spatter patterns were consistent with multiple impacts from a blunt force weapon, Dr. Wong reported. Someone had made a considerable effort to clean the blood with bleach and other chemicals, but luminol testing revealed the full extent of the violence that had occurred in that room. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Jennifer Mitchell. Additional testing found genetic material from all 3 children in the master bedroom, suggesting they had been present during or immediately after their mother's attack. The basement search yielded equally disturbing evidence. Behind the water heater, investigators found a black garbage bag containing blood-stained bedding, towels, and cleaning supplies. The items had been soaked in bleach, but forensic testing still revealed DNA from all 4 missing family members. Hidden beneath the basement stairs, investigators discovered Jennifer's car keys and cell phone. Both had been wiped clean of fingerprints, suggesting careful cleanup by someone familiar with forensic procedures. The most damning physical evidence was found in David's workshop in the garage. A crowbar from his tool collection tested positive for blood and showed microscopic traces of hair and tissue. The tool had been recently cleaned, but forensic analysis revealed DNA from Jennifer and all 3 children. As news of the forensic findings leaked through the small community, public opinion began to shift dramatically. The sympathy that had initially surrounded David transformed into suspicion and eventually outright hostility. The transformation was particularly evident at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, where the Mitchell family had been active members for over a decade. Pastor William Schmidt, who had counseled the couple during a brief marital rough patch in 2009, noticed the change in his congregation's attitude toward David. At first, everyone rallied around David, Pastor Schmidt later recalled. People brought casseroles, offered to help with household tasks, volunteered for search parties. But as questions about his story began to surface, the support started to evaporate. By the end of October, David was essentially isolated within his own church community. The shift was even more pronounced among Jennifer's colleagues at Cedar Falls General Hospital. Nancy Williams, who had discovered the family's disappearance, became an unofficial spokesperson for hospital staff, who were increasingly convinced that David had harmed his family. Jennifer loved those children more than life itself, Nancy told reporters. There's no way she would have left them voluntarily, and there's absolutely no way she would have put them in danger. If Jennifer and the kids are gone, it's because someone took them away from her by force. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, Jennifer's supervisor in the pediatric unit, was more direct in her assessment. I've worked with Jennifer for 12 years. She's the most devoted mother I've ever known. David's story doesn't add up, and frankly, his behavior since the disappearance has been disturbing. An innocent man doesn't lawyer up 3 days after his family goes missing. The criticism reached David through friends and acquaintances who remained in contact with him. His neighbor, Robert Chen, who had helped with yard work and borrowed tools over the years, noticed a dramatic change in David's demeanor after the press conference. Before the forensic results came out, David seemed genuinely distraught, Chen observed. He was calling everyone, organizing search parties, barely sleeping. But after the police found evidence in his house, he became very calm, very controlled. It was like he flipped a switch. David's behavior during this period would later be analyzed extensively by criminal psychologists. Rather than appearing increasingly desperate as days passed without word from his family, David seemed to become more composed and businesslike in his approach to the investigation. He met regularly with his attorney, Michael Brennan, to discuss legal strategy. He hired a public relations consultant, Patricia Morrison, to help manage media requests and craft public statements. He even consulted with a private investigator, former state trooper James Sullivan, about conducting an independent search for his family. These actions, while potentially reasonable for an innocent person facing mounting suspicion, struck many observers as oddly methodical for a husband and father whose family had vanished without trace. The final blow to David's public image came on Sunday, October 28th, when the Harrisburg Patriot News published a front-page investigative article titled "The Mitchell Mystery: Unanswered Questions About a Family's Disappearance." The article, written by veteran crime reporter Sarah Martinez, detailed the forensic evidence found in the Mitchell home and raised pointed questions about discrepancies in David's story. Most damaging was Martinez's investigation into David's financial situation, which revealed a level of debt and deception that shocked the Cedar Falls community. According to Martinez's reporting, David Mitchell was drowning in secret debt totaling over $150,000, much of it related to gambling losses at Atlantic City casinos and online poker sites. The family's savings account, which Jennifer believed contained their emergency fund of $45,000, had been completely depleted over the previous 18 months. Even more troubling was the revelation that David had taken out a $300,000 life insurance policy on Jennifer just 6 months before her disappearance, bringing her total coverage to $750,000, an amount that far exceeded what financial planners would typically recommend for a family of their income level. The insurance revelation prompted a new line of investigation by Detective Hayes, who discovered that David had consulted with 3 different insurance agencies before settling on the policy. According to agents at competing firms, David had asked specific questions about payout procedures, waiting periods, and circumstances that might delay claims processing. He seemed more interested in the technical aspects of the policy than in protecting his family's financial future, observed Agent Margaret Thompson from Mutual of Omaha. Most clients want to understand coverage and premiums. David asked very detailed questions about how claims were processed and what documentation would be required. As October drew to a close, Cedar Falls had transformed from a community united in search of a missing family to a town divided over the guilt or innocence of David Mitchell. The Halloween decorations that appeared on porches and lawns seemed grimly appropriate for a community grappling with the possibility that unthinkable evil had occurred in their midst. As November began, the Mitchell case was officially transferred from the Cedar Falls Police Department to the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Detective Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran specializing in domestic violence and family annihilation cases, was assigned as lead investigator. Rodriguez brought a wealth of experience to the case, having worked on similar investigations across Pennsylvania, including the infamous Clearfield County family murders of 2008 and the Westmoreland County disappearances of 2010. Her first action was to assemble a task force that included forensic specialists, financial crimes investigators, and behavioral analysts. The task force approach reflected the growing complexity of the Mitchell investigation. What had begun as a straightforward missing persons case had evolved into a multifaceted criminal investigation involving suspected homicide, financial fraud, insurance fraud, and elaborate evidence tampering. Rodriguez's first major breakthrough came from analyzing David Mitchell's cell phone records, which painted a disturbing picture of his activities in the days leading up to his family's disappearance. While Jennifer's phone had been turned off at 11:23 p.m. on October 14th, David's phone remained active throughout the night, showing a pattern of movement that contradicted his later statements to police. GPS data from David's phone revealed that he had left the Mitchell home at 11:47 p.m. on October 14th and driven to an area near Michaud State Forest, approximately 30 miles southeast of Cedar Falls. The phone remained in that location from 12:15 a.m. until 4:23 a.m. on October 15th, then returned to Cedar Falls, arriving back at the Mitchell residence at 5:02 a.m. This timeline was crucial because it meant David had been away from home for over 5 hours during the night before his family's disappearance, a fact he had never mentioned to investigators. When confronted with this evidence during a November 15th interview, David provided yet another revision to his story. "I couldn't sleep that night," David told Rodriguez and Detective Hayes. "Jennifer and I had an argument about money. Nothing serious, just the usual stress about bills and expenses. I was restless, so I went for a drive to clear my head. I do that sometimes when I'm stressed." "Where did you drive, Mr. Mitchell?" Rodriguez asked. "Just around the countryside, the back road south of town. It helps me think when I'm driving on quiet roads at night." "Did you stop anywhere during this drive?" David hesitated, a pause that Rodriguez noted in her report. "I might have pulled over to make some phone calls. I was thinking about calling my brother in Pittsburgh, but I realized it was too late." "Your phone records don't show any outgoing calls during that time period." "Right. I decided against it. Like I said, it was too late to be calling people." Rodriguez found David's explanation unconvincing, particularly when combined with other evidence the task force had uncovered. A canvass of gas stations and convenience stores along the route David's phone had traveled yielded security footage showing his black BMW sedan at a Sunoco station on Route 34 at 12:52 a.m. The footage showed David purchasing a large coffee, a pack of gum, and, most significantly, a camping shovel from the store's limited hardware section. When presented with the receipt and security footage, David claimed he couldn't remember making the purchase. "I buy a lot of things when I'm stressed," he said. "Maybe I thought I needed the shovel for yard work. I honestly don't remember." The camping shovel purchase was particularly significant because it matched the description of a tool that was missing from David's garage workshop. According to Jennifer's sister Patricia, who had helped with yard work at the Mitchell home earlier that year, David had owned a small camping shovel that he used for garden work and minor landscaping projects. Rodriguez's team also uncovered evidence of extensive advance planning that suggested David had been preparing for his family's disappearance for weeks before it occurred. Bank records showed that David had withdrawn $15,000 in cash from various accounts over a 3-week period in September 2012, always in amounts small enough to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. The cash withdrawals followed a pattern that indicated sophisticated planning: $2,900 from his business account on September 8th, $3,100 from a personal savings account on September 12th, $2,800 from a credit union account on September 15th, and so on. Each withdrawal was accompanied by a plausible explanation: business expenses, home repairs, or family activities, but the cumulative total suggested David was building a substantial cash reserve. Even more disturbing was the discovery of David's internet search history, recovered from his home computer and office computers by the Pennsylvania State Police Computer Crime Unit. The searches, conducted primarily during late-night hours when his family would have been asleep, painted a chilling picture of premeditation. Between August 15th and October 10th, 2012, David had conducted hundreds of internet searches related to topics that would prove prophetic. How long before missing person declared dead Pennsylvania? Life insurance payout missing person versus deceased. Best places to dispose of evidence rural Pennsylvania. How to clean blood from carpet and walls. Luminol testing, how effective after cleaning. Remote camping areas, Michaud State Forest. How deep to dig hole to prevent discovery. Pennsylvania State Police missing persons procedures. Statute of Limitations, murder, Pennsylvania. The search history also revealed David's research into new identity creation and relocation procedures. How to establish new identity legally. States without extradition, Pennsylvania. Best cities to disappear and start over. How to get Social Security card with different name. Cash only apartment rental, no credit check. Rodriguez and her team also discovered that David had been scouting potential burial locations for weeks before his family's disappearance. Traffic cameras and automated license plate readers tracked his BMW sedan, making multiple trips to remote areas of south-central Pennsylvania during September and early October 2012. On September 22nd, David's car was recorded traveling Route 34 toward Michaud State Forest at 2:17 p.m. on a Saturday, when he had told Jennifer he was attending a business seminar in Harrisburg. Similar trips were documented on September 29th, October 6th, and October 13th, each time when David had provided alternative explanations for his whereabouts. The most damning evidence came from David's purchase of hunting licenses and camping permits. Despite having no history of hunting or outdoor recreation, David had obtained a Pennsylvania hunting license on September 15, 2012, along with permits for camping in state forest areas. The permits specifically included access to remote sections of Michaud State Forest, including an area known locally as Dead Man's Hollow. The irony of the location's name would not be lost on investigators when the Mitchell family's bodies were eventually discovered there, over a decade later. Financial investigators working with Rodriguez's team uncovered the full scope of David's deception regarding the family's finances. What Jennifer believed was a stable middle-class financial situation was actually a house of cards built on secret debt, hidden gambling losses, and increasingly desperate attempts to maintain appearances. David's gambling problem had begun innocently enough in 2009 with office football pools and occasional trips to Atlantic City casinos with friends. But credit card records and casino surveillance footage revealed an escalating pattern of addiction that had consumed the family's entire financial foundation. Between January 2011 and October 2012, David had gambled away approximately $180,000 at various Atlantic City casinos, with losses accelerating dramatically in the months before his family's disappearance. In August 2012 alone, he had lost $23,000 during 4 separate weekend trips to Caesars Atlantic City, each time telling Jennifer he was attending insurance conferences or visiting his brother in Pittsburgh. The online gambling losses were even more extensive. David had accounts with 17 different offshore gambling websites, funded through a complex network of credit cards, cash advances, and business loans. His largest single loss occurred on October 8, 2012, just 1 week before his family's disappearance, when he lost $31,000 in a single night playing online poker. To fund his gambling addiction, David had systematically looted every available source of money. The family's savings accounts had been emptied. Their children's college funds had been drained. David had taken cash advances against 17 different credit cards, often using balance transfers to hide the extent of his borrowing from Jennifer. Most seriously, David had been embezzling money from his insurance agency's client accounts, a crime that would have been discovered during routine audits scheduled for November 2012. Insurance commissioner records showed that David had diverted over $85,000 in client premium payments to his personal accounts, creating false records to cover the theft. David was facing complete financial and professional ruin, explained white-collar crime specialist Detective Mark Sullivan, who joined Rodriguez's task force in December 2012. His embezzlement would have been discovered within weeks. His gambling debts were being called in by loan sharks, and his credit cards were maxed out. He was looking at criminal charges, bankruptcy, and the loss of everything he had worked to build. The pressure from creditors had become increasingly intense in the weeks before the disappearance. Phone records showed that David received dozens of calls from collection agencies, casino credit departments, and individuals who investigators believed were connected to illegal gambling operations. One particularly troubling call came from a blocked number on October 10, 2012. The call lasted 17 minutes, and phone company records showed it originated from Atlantic City. While the content of the conversation was never determined, David's internet searches immediately afterward included queries about personal safety loan sharks and witness protection program eligibility. As 2012 drew to a close, Rodriguez's task force had assembled overwhelming circumstantial evidence pointing to David Mitchell as the perpetrator of his family's murders. They had established motive, financial desperation, means, access to the victims and murder weapon, and opportunity, unaccounted time, and contradictory alibis. What they lacked was the one piece of evidence that would allow prosecutors to file murder charges: the bodies. Without physical proof that Jennifer, Ashley, Tyler, and Madison Mitchell were dead, Pennsylvania law made it extremely difficult to prosecute David for their murders. While the evidence strongly suggested homicide, defense attorneys could argue that the family had simply disappeared, perhaps fleeing from threats related to David's gambling debts. District Attorney Patricia Walsh, recognizing the strength of the circumstantial evidence but understanding the legal challenges, made the difficult decision to continue the investigation rather than rush to prosecution. "We have one chance to get this right," Walsh told Rodriguez's task force in January 2013. "If we charge David now and fail to convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt, double jeopardy protections mean we can never try him again, even if we later find the bodies. We need to be absolutely certain we have enough evidence for conviction." As winter turned to spring in 2013, the intensive investigation began to wind down. David Mitchell remained free but under constant surveillance, living as a pariah in the community where he had once been respected. The case was officially classified as cold in March 2013, though Rodriguez and her team never stopped working on it entirely. The Mitchell home at 247 Elm Avenue stood empty, its windows boarded up and yard overgrown. The Halloween decorations from October 2012 remained on the front porch, faded and weather-beaten, like a monument to a family that had vanished without trace. For the next 9 years, the Mitchell case would haunt Cedar Falls and the investigators who had worked so hard to solve it. Annual vigils were held, missing person posters remained on telephone poles throughout the town, and the case became the subject of true crime podcasts, television documentaries, and internet speculation. But the most important evidence remained buried beneath 4 feet of Pennsylvania soil, waiting for a hunter's dog to catch a scent that would finally bring justice to Jennifer, Ashley, Tyler, and Madison Mitchell. The classification of the Mitchell case as cold in March 2013 marked the beginning of a 9-year period that would test the resolve of investigators, devastate a community, and transform David Mitchell from a suspected killer living in freedom to a man haunted by his own crimes. Detective Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, despite moving on to other cases, never abandoned her investigation of the Mitchell family disappearance. Every few months she would return to the case files, review evidence, and follow up on new leads generated by media coverage or public interest. "Cold cases are never really cold," Rodriguez explained years later. "They're just waiting for the right piece of evidence, the right witness, or the right technology to break them open. I always believed the Mitchell case would be solved eventually. I just didn't know it would take 10 years. The impact on Cedar Falls was profound and lasting. The town's population of 8,200 had been fundamentally changed by the knowledge that one of their own had likely committed the ultimate betrayal. Property values on Elm Avenue declined as potential buyers avoided the notorious street. Local businesses reported decreased tourism, as visitors who might have stopped for lunch or shopping while passing through chose to bypass the town entirely. Dr. Rachel Green, a trauma counselor hired by Cedar Falls Borough Council to help residents cope with the ongoing uncertainty, documented the psychological toll the unsolved case took on the community. Unresolved trauma creates a particular kind of psychological wound, Dr. Green explained in her final report to the Borough Council in 2015. When people don't know what happened to victims they cared about, when justice seems impossible, it creates a persistent anxiety that affects daily life. Many Cedar Falls residents reported symptoms consistent with community-wide PTSD. The symptoms Dr. Green observed included increased domestic security measures, new locks, security systems, protective dogs, reluctance to trust neighbors or participate in community activities, and persistent anxiety about the safety of children and family members. St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, where the Mitchell family had been active members, struggled with declining attendance and internal conflict over how to handle David Mitchell's continued presence in the community. Pastor William Schmidt attempted to counsel David and encourage confession, but found him unresponsive to spiritual intervention. David continued to attend services sporadically through 2014, Pastor Schmidt recalled. He would sit in the back pew, never participating in communion or fellowship activities. Other congregation members were uncomfortable with his presence, but Christian charity required us to welcome him. It created a terrible tension within our church family. The situation became untenable in December 2014, when David attempted to participate in the church's annual Christmas pageant, offering to help with staging and sound equipment. The reaction from other parents was swift and decisive. If David Mitchell was involved with the children's program, their children would not participate. I had to make an impossible choice, Pastor Schmidt said. Either exclude David from church activities or watch our Christmas program collapse, because parents wouldn't allow their children to participate. I chose to protect the children and asked David to limit his involvement to regular worship services. David's response was to stop attending church altogether, further isolating himself from the community that had once embraced him. The financial consequences of David's crimes continued to reverberate throughout this period. Keystone Insurance Agency, where David had worked and embezzled client funds, was forced to close permanently in June 2013. The Pennsylvania Insurance Commissioner's Office determined that the agency's bonding and insurance coverage was insufficient to cover the losses David had created. 23 clients lost their premium payments, totaling over $85,000, and were forced to secure new insurance coverage at higher rates. Several small businesses that had relied on Keystone for their commercial insurance were particularly hard hit, with some reporting that the increased insurance costs forced them to lay off employees or reduce operations. Grace Morrison, David's former secretary, lost her job when the agency closed and struggled to find comparable employment in Cedar Falls' limited job market. At age 58, she was forced to relocate to Harrisburg to find work, leaving behind a community where she had lived her entire life. David's crimes didn't just destroy his own family, Morrison said. They rippled out to affect dozens of other families, other businesses, other lives. The whole community paid the price for his selfishness and deception. David himself appeared to adapt to his pariah status with disturbing equanimity. After selling the family home on Elm Avenue in August 2015 for significantly less than its assessed value, he moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of town. The apartment complex, primarily occupied by temporary workers and people with limited housing options, became David's refuge from the constant scrutiny of his former neighbors. Residents of the Maple Grove apartments reported that David kept to himself, rarely speaking to other tenants and never participating in community activities. He found employment as a night security guard at a small manufacturing plant, a job that required minimal interaction with coworkers and allowed him to avoid public scrutiny. He was like a ghost, said apartment manager Carol Stevens. Always paid his rent on time, never caused problems, but there was something unsettling about him. He'd nod politely if you saw him coming or going, but his eyes were empty, like there was nothing behind them. The sale of the Mitchell home became a community controversy that dragged on for months. The house, despite its connection to tragedy, was structurally sound and located in a desirable neighborhood. But potential buyers were deterred by its notorious history and the possibility that it might become a macabre tourist attraction. Real estate agent Margaret Patterson, who handled the listing, reported numerous inquiries from true crime enthusiasts and amateur investigators rather than legitimate homebuyers. We had people wanting to tour the house who clearly had no intention of buying, Patterson recalled. They wanted to see the master bedroom where the blood evidence was found, or the basement where Jennifer's belongings were hidden. It was ghoulish and disrespectful to the victim's memory. The house eventually sold to a real estate investor from Lancaster, who planned to renovate it completely and rent it to tenants unfamiliar with its history. The renovation, completed in early 2016, changed the house's appearance dramatically. New siding, windows, landscaping, and interior modifications that made it barely recognizable as the former Mitchell home. Throughout this period, the investigation continued in fits and starts. Rodriguez and her team followed up on hundreds of tips generated by media coverage, most of which proved to be false leads or misidentifications. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries, and numerous true crime podcasts, but none of the publicity generated actionable intelligence. The most promising lead came in October 2016, exactly 4 years after the disappearance, when a hiker in Michaud State Forest discovered human remains in a remote area approximately 20 miles from where the Mitchell bodies would eventually be found. The remains, badly decomposed and scattered by animals, were initially thought to be those of Jennifer Mitchell. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Susan Chen conducted extensive analysis of the remains, including DNA testing and comparison with Jennifer's medical records. After 6 weeks of investigation, the remains were identified as those of Harold Peterson, a 67-year-old man who had gone missing while hiking in 2014. While the discovery brought closure to the Peterson family, it was another disappointment for investigators hoping to solve the Mitchell case. The financial investigation into David's affairs continued to reveal the full scope of his deception. Forensic accountant Margaret Thompson, working with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, documented a complex web of fraud that extended far beyond simple gambling losses. David had created false invoices for his insurance agency, claiming business expenses that were actually used to fund gambling trips. He had forged Jennifer's signature on loan applications and credit card agreements, borrowing money against their home's equity without her knowledge. Most seriously, he had established several shell companies that existed only on paper, using them to launder money and hide assets from creditors. David Mitchell was running what amounted to a one-man criminal enterprise, Thompson explained. The gambling was just the tip of the iceberg. He had created an elaborate financial structure designed to hide money and deceive creditors, investigators, and his own family. The insurance investigation proved equally complex. David had taken out policies on his entire family through 6 different insurance companies, often using slightly different information to avoid triggering coordination of benefits reviews. The total coverage on Jennifer was $750,000, while the children were insured for $100,000 each. Insurance fraud investigator James Morrison discovered that David had consulted with actuarial specialists about life expectancy calculations and had specifically asked about payout procedures for missing persons versus confirmed deaths. David was treating his family's lives like a business investment, Morrison observed. He calculated the financial benefit of their deaths and planned accordingly. It was coldly calculating and utterly heartless. As the years passed, David's behavior became increasingly erratic and antisocial. Neighbors at the Maple Grove apartments reported that he would sometimes pace the hallways at night, muttering to himself. He developed a drinking problem, often consuming alcohol before and during his night security shifts. Plant supervisor Robert Martinez, David's boss at the manufacturing facility, noticed a decline in David's performance and reliability starting around 2018. He was always punctual and followed procedures, Martinez recalled, but he seemed to be somewhere else mentally. Sometimes I'd find him just staring off into space, not responding when I called his name. Other times he'd be agitated and paranoid, convinced that people were watching him or talking about him. The paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. Rodriguez's task force maintained periodic surveillance of David throughout the cold case years, hoping he might lead them to evidence or make incriminating statements. Private investigators hired by Jennifer's family also kept David under observation, documenting his daily routines and activities. Jennifer's sister, Patricia Morrison, who had relocated to Cedar Falls in 2013 to keep pressure on the investigation, became the unofficial spokesperson for the family during this period. She organized annual memorial services, maintained a website dedicated to the missing family members, and worked tirelessly to keep the case in public consciousness. I couldn't let people forget about Jennifer and the children, Patricia explained. I knew that David was responsible, and I knew that eventually he would make a mistake or evidence would surface. But I had to make sure that when that happened, people still cared enough to demand justice. Patricia's efforts included lobbying for legislative changes to Pennsylvania's missing persons laws, working with victim advocacy groups, and cooperating with true crime media coverage of the case. Her persistence kept the Mitchell case from fading into obscurity during the long years when no new evidence emerged. The true crime community's fascination with the Mitchell case grew throughout this period, fueled by the compelling combination of family annihilation, financial fraud, and the mystery of the missing bodies. Reddit communities devoted extensive discussion threads to analyzing evidence, debating theories, and speculating about the location of the remains. The most popular theory, which would prove remarkably accurate, suggested that David had buried his family in a remote area of state forest land, probably somewhere he had scouted in advance. Amateur investigators used David's known travel patterns, cell phone data, and geographical analysis to identify potential burial sites. A group of volunteer searchers calling themselves Justice for the Mitchells organized periodic expeditions to search remote areas of south-central Pennsylvania. While their efforts were well-intentioned, they were also potentially dangerous, as untrained civilians could contaminate evidence or compromise future investigations. Rodriguez discouraged amateur search efforts, but acknowledged their value in keeping public interest alive. The volunteers meant well, and their dedication was admirable, Rodriguez said, but criminal investigation requires specialized training and equipment. The best thing the public could do was provide tips and maintain pressure for the case to remain active. What investigators uncovered next would shock Cedar Falls to its core, but that part of the story continues in part 2. Head to our page now to watch the second half of this shocking case.